Okay, so in part one of this NanoFX conversion tutorial, we covered the basics of just getting a Bridge Commander model and prepare it for use in the NanoFX viewer. So by now you should have a working and viewable model in NanoFX viewer. But as we saw in the first tutorial, the textures lack a lot. They are just basic textures and they are rendered with no extra detailing or anything. So let's go in here, back in the NanoFX viewer, load object, and we're going to find our type 9. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is go into our working directory, which is in your NanoFX folder, type 9, and our texture folder. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to rename all of these base textures by removing just the underscore glow. So go ahead, most of your stuff that's brought over from Bridge Commander will have a naming scheme like this, because this naming is Texture Spec 1 kind of relied on that naming scheme, at least in Bridge Commander, to ensure that the files acted the way you wanted them to. But we're going to do things differently because NanoFX uses a newer version of DirectX, and Texture Spec 2 renders things differently and utilizes alphas differently and stuff like that. So now that we've renamed all the textures, we're going to open them in our image editing program. In this instance is Photoshop, and we're simply going to open it and then just save it as, and under the format type we're going to choose DDS. And if this is the first time you've used the NVIDIA DDS format tool, then it's going to be probably set to this option, but we want to use DXT5 interpolated alpha, and that's pretty much all you should do. Once you've selected this once and save, it will remain as a default. So go through, change all of these textures and save them to DDS, and you can delete the original TGAs. So we'll do this one here. File, save as, format, DDS, save, and so it saved our previous setting, and save. Close, go back to our folder and delete that. So just go ahead and do that for all the textures so you don't have any TGA left. They've all been replaced with the DDS file type. Okay, so we've gone through and we've renamed and saved all of our textures to a DDS format, and I'll just quickly show you the benefit to doing that. Here is the original texture, and it's in a TGA format, which was the compatible format for Bridge Commander. DDS format is a compressed texture type that has a really good high compression with a fairly low loss quality compression. So as you can see, the original file, and this is a 1024 by 512 texture, is 4 megabytes. The exact same texture, same size in DDS format is just over 1 megabyte. So the reduction value is obviously noticeable, especially in the larger ships like the Galaxies and things like that that have 2048 textures. They can be upwards of 16 megabytes. Saving them to a DDS will knock them down to about 4 megabytes. So we've converted all of our textures to a new format, but we're going to find out that they aren't going to work right away in the viewer. If we go back to the viewer, which should still be open, and hit F12 to refresh or reload the textures, our model is going to come up naked. And that's because even though there are textures here, the model is referencing textures that are no longer there. So in order to correct that, you need to go to your model file, which is the .x file, and if you haven't done so, or if it's not done so already, associate the .x files with Notepad. So right click, open with, choose a default program and select Notepad or whatever your preferred text editor. So we're going to open this. It's a fairly small file, opens up pretty quick. Some of the larger ones will take some time to load and then to save. So we're going to go edit, find, and we want to look for the textures. They're all going to be all together. So .tga, hit find next, and then just close this window. And if you scroll down, you'll see all of our textures that the model references are listed here. But we've changed them. They're no longer TGAs, and we also have removed the glow naming scheme from them. So just simply delete everything but the base texture name and add the new extension. So we're going to delete the underscore glow and the file extension type TGA. We're pretty lucky here because this is a small ship with not a lot of detail. Some ships I've converted have 25 or 30 textures and it can get pretty tedious. So we're all done renaming them. Just go File, Save, and when it's saved, close the editor. Okay, so now we can go back to the viewer, and we have to reload the model because we did just modify the actual model. This one's loaded into memory, so it has to be reloaded in order for the viewer to recognize the changes. So Federation, Shuttles, Type 9, make sure that you have player ship checkmarked, and load object. There we go. So we're back to square one. One thing you'll notice, the difference, again with larger ships and larger textures, is they will load a lot faster in the DDS format. The TGA textures definitely take a lot longer to load, and they obviously will use up more video memory when the models are loaded. So nothing has changed. The textures are essentially the same. They're just a different format, but the same appearance, and we're going to improve that. So open up the first base texture, and we're going to go to Filter, NVIDIA Tools. This is part of the development toolkit where you've got the DDS extension plugin, and it also provides you with this normal map filter. So under Filters, NVIDIA Tools, and select Normal Map Filter. So you're going to have to set some options here. Make sure your filter type is 4-sample, and you want to invert the Y. You want to set it to max RGB, and the alpha field you want to set to 1.0. The scale is more or less user dependent. That's the scale of depth or perceived depth that the texture will have. 3 is just a general rule of thumb that I use for most of them. Sometimes the bigger or more detailed a ship, you may want a deeper normal map. I think 3 is going to work. I'll just, for example here, if I put in 10, you'll see in the dynamic preview window it really bumps things up. So it's pretty extreme. We don't want that. Let's go back to 3. And animate light. Click OK. Once you use those settings once, it'll save them for future use, so you don't have to keep inputting those settings, just like the DDS file type settings. So that's it. So there's our normal map. If you want to, make sure your alpha channels in your normal maps are black and that they don't contain any alpha information like illuminations or anything like that. So that's it. So we'll go to File, Save As, and we're going to just add a naming scheme to this of underscore normal. Sort of like the way the original ones were underscore glow. These ones are going to be called underscore normal because these are the normal maps. Again, save, and that's it. So that was the bottom texture. So let's just see what the differences are. So if we hit F12 to reload in the viewer, it's going to reload the textures with the bump map applied. So as you can see, it added some depth to these lines. There are some things you may not want to have to be affected by a normal map. So for instance, things like these little red triangles, and up here on the nacelles and the side of the ship, I'm going to call these painted areas. Like for instance, registration numbers, names, and other information that's printed on there. Like for instance, the caution border around this phaser array. Obviously we don't want that stuff raised, because the idea is the normal maps kind of cheat the model a little bit in giving you the appearance of depth. So for instance, those lines in the texture now have a sort of perceived depth to them. They catch light here in different ways to make it seem like they're recessed. So go back into your working directory, and the next base texture is this one. So I'll bring that into Photoshop, Filter, NVIDIA Tools, Normal Map Filter. All of your previous settings should be saved. Click OK. Go into your alpha channel on this one, and if you don't have this workflow like this, just go Windows, Channels, click on it, and it'll bring up your channels. Go to the alpha channel, take your tool brush, your paintbrush, black, 100%, and just paint out that alpha stuff, because we just want a straight black alpha channel. And that's it. File, save as, underscore, normal, save, and save. So this is an example of where we do and don't want the normal texture applied to certain areas. So let's reload the textures. And as you can see, we've got the same effect now. See this little area? It's not modeled, it's purely texture, but it gives the appearance by catching and redistributing light that it's part of the model. But you will also see that this now also has a raised effect, and personally I don't want that, because let's face it, when you paint something, it doesn't become embossed or anything like that, and it's going to look much more like this on the registration. The larger the area, the worse it'll look, and it actually really detracts from the model. So go back into your working directory, reopen the normal file, use your paintbrush, hold Control to take a sample of anywhere that's just the basic color. Get a more practical tool size here, and then just go in and paint over that line like that, and then just resave it. Now if we go back into the viewer, zoom into the nacelle here, and we'll click F12 to reload the textures, and there. So that texture is no longer affected by the normal map, because we excluded it by painting it out of the normal map. Not much of a significant change there, but if you were to apply a normal filter to this stuff, because it's such a stark difference in color, especially the black, you'll get very noticeable embossing effects, and we don't want that. So go ahead and convert all of your textures to normal textures by modifying each base texture. So this one, this one, this one, and this one.